So I'm going to read because I won't be able to keep it together any other way. There are 6 children of Andy and Ruth Zwiefler, my big brother John, big sister Lizzie, then myself, Mark, Rian, Natanya. The 5 of us now gray-haired kids were all born within a span of 6 and then about the time us original 5 started to age out of the house, Mom and Dad restocked with Yolanda, followed by 16 grandchildren, and now 3, soon 4 great-grandchildren. As if that wasn't enough, our parents' extended household also includes Yasmin Sununu from Gaza, who lived at the house for many years while obtaining her PhD. Yasmin, like us, also calls my parents Mom and Dad. And then there is Robert Curry, Tanya James, TJ, now Tanya Wallace, who first came into our lives when we were all little kids, lived at the house at various times, and as fate would have it, are the mother and uncle to my little sister, Yvette. Robert and TJ called my parents Doc and Ruth. We all want to welcome and thank you for joining us as we grieve the loss, cherish the memories, celebrate the life and spirit of our mother, Ruth LaPlace Zwiefler. The passing of Mom has layered meanings, as it comes just 2 years after losing our wonderful dad and grandpa. Now having to say goodbye to our beloved home at 1706 South U, and for, at least for us gray-haired kids, the creeping realization common to all old orphans that we are now next up on the wheel. My folks moved into our big brown house next to Angel School in 1960, and it's where, praise be to God, they both were able to exhale their last breaths. We all love that house like a member of the family. With Mom's passing in January, that house, for the very first time in 65 years, was lonely. That house loves to be full of life and enjoys just a bit of chaos. We look forward to you all joining us later today to help warm its walls and maybe even raise its roof a little. So out of our big tribe, as my brother-in-law Steve would say, a tribe of all chiefs and no Indians, how is it that I'm the first one to open up this period of sharing? Well, maybe because my parents' blessings, me and my family have received the most. Most concretely is my old farmhouse in the woods and wetlands of Jackson County, the home where Donna and I raised Jasmine, Caleb, and Zach. Most sweetly, because like Yolanda, we stayed local longest, and our kids have their grandparents as such a constant and beautiful part of their lives. All the holidays, birthdays, school concerts, soccer games, school plays, graduations were made so extra special with Grandma and Grandpa's warm and regal presence. Later in life, every Ypsi bar and Detroit club were made all the cooler when Mom and Dad made the scene in their 80s and 90s. Because we live close, Alonda and my kids got the biggest helping of G-Ma and G-Pa's attention. Setting aside Ayana, who much to the discomfort of her very modest nature, was always Mom's slam dunk favorite. Mom loved all her grandchildren equally. Deeply and sorely missed them all when they were away. In fact, missing them before they were even out the door. I hear about lonely old folks who rarely hear from or get visits from their grandkids. Not the case for my parents. My nephews and nieces were more than reciprocated their grandparents' love, making extraordinary efforts to travel from California, Colorado, and Chicago to hang with Jima and Jipa. So while it's true that mom fits a picture I've just painted of a devoted matriarch, knitting us gifts of sweaters, hats, and Christmas stockings, that is just but one aspect of her existence. My mom was a very serious, intelligent, passionate, complicated woman. And hers was a very full life with concerns extended well beyond her family. On one hand, a very proper, carefully mannered, opera-loving, Bryn Mawr educated lady who was concerned with appearances. On the other, immodest, hot-tempered, loud, and frankly, a bit profane. She is known and has been honored many times by many organizations for being a fierce advocate for the most neglected, the victims who always get the blame. But for her family, that part of her life was secondary. And at times, her causes and inner demons would make us kids wish for a more normal mom. But that was not our fate. We are all shaped and have been blessed with an extraordinary one. Mom loved language and poetry. She was a formidable Scrabble opponent, fascinated by how words could be used to both reveal and distort. A world without Ruth would be ruthless. In the weeks before Mama died, I Googled the word ruthless. And according to Merriam-Webster, ruthless can be defined as without Ruth or having no Ruth. So what then is Ruth? The noun Ruth, which is now considerably less common than ruthless, means compassion for the misery of another, sorrow for one's own faults, or remorse. And just as it's possible for one to be without Ruth, it's also possible to be full of Ruth. On my mom's 90th birthday, I wrote some lines. Mama, truth. With garden dirt under her fingernails, she listens to her favorite opera, reading stories to open children, speaking truth to closed minds. Love and worry for home and family, love and worry for the dismissed and oppressed, spite and fury for the arrogant and unjust, robbing her of a good night's rest, her restless spirit in our breasts, garden dirt under her fingernails, pulling weeds, planting flowers. What would we be without you? My mom was a restless spirit who rarely enjoyed a good night's sleep. When I called my wife, Donna, on the afternoon that Mom died, Donna said what is often said at such times when she prayed, God rest her soul. Those words touched me in a place quite deep. A few days later, my friend Billy called to express condolences. And because Bill is a good Catholic, who I suspect has better insights on things like souls and other matters celestial. I shared that story, and I expected him to give me a nice somber affirmation. But instead, Billy laughs and says, Mark, rest her soul. Your mom is probably up in heaven right now, giving God the what for. Mm. There's a memory book that she wrote for Natania's daughter, Olivia. And the question on the last page was, Grandma, at the end of your life, how would you like your children and grandchildren to remember you? And Mom wrote, I hope you will remember being being together as times of joy. I hope you will remember me as somebody who loved beauty and nature and art, music and language. I would like you to remember that I yearn for a world of peace, whereas the Quakers say, everyone recognized and treasured that of God and others. And then as a postscript, she writes, and it would be nice if you thought I was a good cook. Which she was, but she very rarely blessed us with that talent. My mother's dream of a world of peace was not a casual abstraction for her. It was a candle that flickered often, with her hand shielded from the wind. She has now passed it on to us. Let's not let it go out.
Actually, you know what? Maybe I can stand.
Okay, but if you do, okay. That's good.
You get that? So, I don't know. Can they people hear? Okay. Who exactly was Ruth LaPlace Zwiefler? She was a complicated woman on many levels. You see, Ruth was an only child for 4 years and 9 months, and then whammy, twins, and 3 months later, our cousin was born. 3 infants to have to contend with, and suddenly she was that underdog. She felt shut out, and as Mom used to say, the day we were born, Ruth's nose was out of joint. And when she was good, she was very, very good. But when she was bad, she was hard. Sibling rivalry was in full bloom. I won't go into the many hurts she could hurl at us, but the positives. She surprised me by taking me on a journey. We took the bus to the ferry, and then we were in the Big Apple and off to see my first Broadway show, The New Moon. I still remember the song, Stout-Hearted Men. Or the time she surprised us with the most unbelievable surprise 16th birthday party, etc., etc., etc. Identifying as the forgotten child, she turned her energies into the philanthropic activities you Ann Arborites know so well. To me, she was always my bright, brilliant, and beautiful big sister, Ruthie. I always adored her in spite of the early hurts. As she aged, she certainly mellowed. If you were down, there was no one who would be more there for you. As she was losing her short-term memory, her long-term one was as sharp as ever. She even reverted to calling me Rosebell, my given and childhood name, even when my phone identified me as Robbie, a name I've been by everyone since the day I went off to college. Ruthie dear, I've always loved you. Was elated when you brought Andy home, and he too was loved by us all. And let's not forget all of my new nephews and nieces, Johnny, Liz, Mark, Rhea, Natanya, Leslie, and David, all so special in your own ways. and to whom I always referred to as the babies I never had. And now, Ruth, dear, may you finally find the peace for which you so tirelessly worked. Find Grandma and Grandpa, Mom and Dad, Alan and Melissa, Andy, and of course, my dear Milt, and give my love to them all. I miss all of you. You will not be forgotten.
It's a hard day. I'm going to read, but I'm also going to speak off of my mind and my heart. Everything that he was saying is so true. I just think about like this is more than just the loss of my mom. It's the loss of so much more. It's hard not knowing that that both of my parents are gone. And we're also gonna lose our house where everything happened. That house was such a standpoint for everything. We do everything there, and to know that everything is gonna be gone is so hard. I think it's a good thing that it's raining today and that it's warm. I'm thinking about all of the times in the phone, and I would call her, Seegert, Elanda. When is it gonna rain? I need you to go outside and do a rain dance for me so that my garden can grow. And, so I think that she would be happy knowing that it's raining today and that her, plants were getting watered. When I was there recently and I saw the things coming up, it was just so hard just knowing that she would be out here like, oh, see these crocuses or forget-me-nots coming up right now. And to know that that's over. And that's so hard. I'm so grateful for everybody who's here today. I have family here, but I have new family that has come to me, that is here supporting me today. And I'm so thankful for all of you and all the people who reached out and checked in and just to see how I was doing and reminding me that I'm loved and I'm not alone. It's fitting that the song was Amazing Grace, and I didn't even really know that that was a song that would be sung. My mom loved to go to church just to hear the music. She always loved I just want to hear the choir sing. She didn't want to hear the preaching. And Sister Peppers, Mother Peppers, she always said, I want Mother Peppers to sing Amazing Grace, when I die. Mother Peppers has since gone on. Ruthie Peppers is no more. But if she was here, I think that she would be here, have sung that song. Just want to kind of let you know a little bit more about who my mom was to me. As a young child, my mother and I have multiple sets of parents, and my biological mother always told me that we get to choose who our parents are going to be, that we can tell God, like we were in heaven and we would tell God who we wanted our parents to be. True to who I am, I was indecisive, choosing to have 3 sets of parents instead of the usual one. Each set of parents has offered me something different. My first set of parents were selfless enough to share me with the parents who became my rocks of Gibraltar, meaning they created a safe and solid foundation for me. My mom was introduced to my mother when my mother was a child. She soon had a relationship with my grandmother after following my mother and uncle home from school, because she was just nosy like that. She's always going to find out what's going on and make sure. That day, my mom never turned back turned the other direction. My mother lived, excuse me. When my mother was a child, she also lived in my parents' home. She soon had a relationship with my grandmother after following my mother and uncle home from school. After that day, my mother never turned back the other direction. My mother lived with my parents as a youth off and on. When she became pregnant with me at a young age, she went to California to be with her mother. But she called my parents because she didn't think that, that was the place that she wanted me to grow up. So she called my parents and said, "Can I come back home?" They didn't even know that she had had a baby. "Can I come back?" And they said yes. And so a month later, on February 10th, I came back, and I was with my parents ever since. Um, so as I'm reading off and on, so she born December 10th and arrived February 10th and never left. God has many names, and one name that comes to me is Elroy. That means, the God who sees me. God sees and saw me, and he saw what I need, and he saw the parents that he had for me, and he gave me parents who loved me. And, I would say always that both of my parents loved me, but my mom loved me. Okay. And she wanted me and she saw me, and that meant so much to me. My parents have 6 children, but my mom was a mom to so many more people. She touched 6 generations of my biological family. She knew my great grandmother, my mother, me, my children, and now my grandson. She touched many other families as well through the Student Advocacy Center and her right for social justice and underserved communities, as well as any people not being treated fairly. Growing up in Ann Arbor in Ann Arbor Public Schools was not easy. Everyone at the schools always knew that I was Ruth Zwiefler's daughter. Okay. Everyone knew that I was Ruth Zwiefler's daughter, and my mom was not to be played with. There were many meetings that started off calm and ended with my mom saying, "This is bullshit," and standing firm on her beliefs and fighting for students' rights. When my mom walked into the room, she brought change. She, she helped and succeeded with getting corporal punishment removed from the schools, all while being hands-on at home. Being adopted is not easy. I think that many people who have been adopted deal with rejection, even when they've had a great family as I did. One thing my mom always showed me was how loved and wanted I was. She made a point every year to remind me the day that I arrived to Michigan and came to her. She sent me a card or called me every year to say, "This is the day that you came to be with us." My mom regularly told me how much of a blessing I was to her, but in fact, she was my blessing, teaching me unconditional love. My mom fought for me. She loved me. She taught me. She was there for me and my children, never missing an important date. I was a late bloomer, but I'm so grateful that my parents had a chance to see who I am becoming. Everyone here has been touched by my mom, Ruth Zwiefler, in some way. I ask that we take that and use our voices to stand up for those whose voices are unheard, especially during these times of so much uncertainty. Let us have a more of the doors always open mindset and heart. Mom, I thank you for choosing me. I thank you for your love. I thank you for the love that you showed my children and being a mom to them when I struggled to be there. Like, it's not easy. I grew up as an only child. I had 5 siblings, but basically by the time, I was growing up, they were already gone. So, while we're family, there's also a distance between us because we didn't grow up in the same household. But, for me, you know, it was, I'm so grateful just that I have the siblings that I have. And no shade or anything on anybody, but the Zwieflers are my family. And they're really like my only like true family that I've ever known. And never been anyone different from, who my parents brought me to be and brought me up. And, I think that, it's hard when you grow up separately. But one thing that mom and dad always wanted is for us to be a family. And they told me that all the time. And it's never been a question in my heart or mind who my family is. And so, I hope that this loss is not just the loss, just mom and dad that I'm losing. I don't want to lose my family as well. It's hard because, it's been hard to grieve. And I know I'm taking up time, but I need this time. It's hard to grieve because there's some isolation, even if it's self-imposed isolation. It's hard just because, number one, I feel like I lost my fabric. I lost my dad. I lost my best friend who was my sister. And then I lost my mom, who was really the only person who I ever really feel like just always stood up for me and like would always have my back, always. And it's so hard not having those people to call on. And I don't want in moving forward not to feel like I can't call on my other family as well. It's hard. But I'm so thankful and grateful to God. And one thing I always tell everybody got different parents. Everybody got a different mom and dad. And my parents may not have been very religious, but my dad stood on me and he always said no. When I was really involved in the church as a teenager, and then when I came back, my dad was like, no, you need to have a relationship with God. He always told me, I want you to have a relationship with God. And so, that looks different for everybody. And, it looks different for me as well on how my relationship with God is. But, I'm thankful for that. And I'm thankful for everything that they taught me and the love that my parents gave me. And, I'm thankful that I feel like, even in this time of great sadness, that, it's also going to pull us together. And, we got to work as a family together. It can't be, just one of us or just some of us. I want to have a relationship with everyone. I love you all. And I appreciate everybody who showed up today. My mom would be like, she doesn't like, a lot of attention, but, her presence definitely filled the room. And I feel her presence here today. And thank you so much for everyone for coming.
Well, just triggering lots of memories and emotions, and thinking back as a child. So mom cared about everyone, but she loved children. And we were the beneficiaries of that. And remembering her reading to us at lunchtime from The Hobbit, remembering the special birthday cake she would make for us and the care that she put into those. And then as we got older, realizing that we would have to share our mom with so many other people, and many of you are in the room today. But also, my most recent memory of my mom is her not dying. And I just remember how brave and courageous she was. I think all of those who know her knew how much she wanted to live, how much she valued life, and she would have lived forever if she could have. But as her health failed her, as a huge surprise, I think, to all of us, because she was strong as an ox, she very quickly deteriorated, and we talked about hospice, and she accepted that in a very gracious way, and accepted that she was going to die. And we spent the last few days at 1706 with all her family, and many of you were there with her. And she was so happy at that time. But brave and courageous to the end. And then looking at going through her papers and her books and all the things she did, getting arrested, standing up for peace and social justice in very real, concrete ways, and it made me realize just how brave and courageous she was throughout her life. And as both Mark and Yolanda have said, how important that is for all of us to be brave and courageous, to carry on her spirit during these very, very difficult times.
Oh, by the way, always I knew family came first. That was always really clear with Ruth, and that was fine with me. I'm Perry Stone Palmquist. I am the co-executive director of Student Advocacy Center. There's a meditation practice that involves actually breathing in pain and suffering of others and breathing out healing, peace, hope. This is known as a practice that cultivates fearlessness, a word that makes me think of Ruth and how she lived her life and how she wants us to live our lives. So many of us try to avoid suffering. I try to avoid suffering. We go to great lengths to avoid it, right? But not Ruth. She turned her heart towards people who were hurting, rejected, wronged. She turned her heart to a little boy who had no friends at school and struggled to read. She turned her heart to a Black teen who was told she better not set her sights too high at school. She turned her heart to a child who had been expelled from school and no one would provide an education. She turned her heart to me, a clueless 24-year-old wrestling with my place in the world. Ruth never ran from my pain or others. She sat with it, softened her heart to let it in, and give it space and care. I think even recently, just a couple months ago, about a time I shared some struggles I was having with my own family, really painful. I remember initially hesitating to tell her, wondering if she would react in judgment to what I was saying. Instead, I left that conversation in awe. The wisdom and compassion she showed overwhelmed me. I noticed some people, it seemed like Ruth sat with the pain too much, that she seemed too negative and angry at the world. Perhaps, sometimes. But I wonder if that is because of how much peace and healing and love and justice she poured out to others. Think of all her many accomplishments, founding Student Advocacy Center with a group of fearless volunteers, winning the Black English case against Ann Arbor Public Schools and making the point that districts must recognize and accommodate language barriers, working with Margaret Harner to end corporal punishment in Michigan schools, and being a critical voice in shifting our cultural understanding of children. Seen but not heard? I don't think so. Ruth taught us that we must be listening very carefully to our children and lifting up their voices. Of course, what I knew best about Ruth was her fight against zero tolerance in school, a cause that she passionately recruited me to 25 years ago. This was a fight that lasted decades and in some ways continues to this day. Indeed, it was many years after she retired, after she stood up at countless expulsion hearings demanding children get an education, after all of her writings, after she recruited countless grad students and professors to write about expulsion, after she and I attended a school-to-prison pipeline at Harvard, after we drove to Lansing, not safe, together countless times to meet with legislators or the Board of Education, after we begged the ACLU to pay attention to this issue and join our fight. After so many steps forwards and backwards, we were able to celebrate the overturning of zero tolerance in 2017. For all of the pain and suffering of others on this issue, Ruth had breathed in over the decades. She was finally able to breathe out healing, peace, hope, an important shift in Michigan. My last word on her accomplishments is about the Student Advocacy Center, of course. A lot of people can start a nonprofit, a lot do. To start a nonprofit that can sustain 50 years is another accomplishment altogether. From its grassroots beginning, with Ruth as a volunteer director, she led with deep values and continually recruited passionate folks who expanded the vision. The focus was always the children, and that's why it persists. Last year, SAC served more than 1,000 children across Michigan, adding to the tens of thousands served over its history, many directly by her. Thanks to Ruth's vision, more and more children every year have an opportunity to get an education and to be connected to an adult who loves them, who listens to them, who elevates their voice, who lives her deep values every day. Ruth is much more than her accomplishments, of course. Her legacy is about the way she lived her life and the way she encouraged us to live ours. For one thing, Ruth would always remind me to fight the bigger fights. You can't just help like one student at a time, she would say. You always have to always work to make the whole system better for everyone. I hear myself repeating that often to my team. It's not easy to love and support this one child in this one moment and to show up in movements that are also working on bigger solutions, but we can never stop trying. The way Ruth tackled this sort of dual micro-macro work was really rooted in love. Too often in the advocacy space, it can feel vicious and overly critical. I mean, after all, our job is to point out where the system is failing and hold people in power accountable for their shortcomings. We need brave people now more than ever, right? But too often, the way we do the work sucks the life out of the movement. Ruth, I noticed, was often the encourager-in-chief. When I went back to read all my emails from her, conversations I had over the last 13 years that I've run Student Advocacy Center, the common theme is unwavering positivity, actually. You brighten my life, these are direct quotes. Not sure of anything except how much I love you and I'm so proud of all you do. Love you for being you. Love you, all caps. Often the subject line was untitled. I've often heard other elected officials and activists say they received similar emails, and I hope for the family here today that you know how much she talked about how much she loved each of you. I hope you know that. Yes, Ruth gave us marching orders, at least me. She called us to higher purpose and to fight bigger fights as bravely as we could. Sometimes I worried I couldn't be brave enough. Yes, she would recognize insidious problems happening all around us and call it out in the most stark terms. Yes, she would never let you sit on your laurels. But you were not the enemy. You were a co-conspirator, and she wanted you in on the fight. And how could you say no? Clearly I couldn't. Her calling was so deep. She believed in us, yes, all of us, to do the right thing. She cheered us on. She loved us. She opened our hearts. And now we must open our own hearts and continue that call bravely And with great encouragement, we must be willing to breathe in that pain, suffering of this moment, and breathe out hope, healing, justice, and love. Thank you.
Jesse said I had to say something. I'm Liz, Ruth's oldest daughter. Welcome, everyone. I've thought about Mom, of course, a lot, but the thing that was difficult, being her daughter, she was not the average mom, which was really hard for me because I just wanted the cookies and milk mom. I wanted the mom that, joined as the room mother. She didn't go for any of that traditional stuff, and it was hard. Early 60s, she began wearing a pin, small pin, little black pin with a silver inlay, and it was a peace symbol. I'd never seen it. No one had ever seen them. And I remember, and it was teeny, but it was weird. I was like, why is she wearing that? She's always wearing that. And then my friends would go, why is she wearing that? And I'm like, Mom, why do you wear that? And she said, I'm protesting the war. Fast forward to a year or two later, you couldn't go 2 steps without seeing a peace symbol. And that was Ruth. She just was ahead of her time. And there were so many things that people do today that I go, oh yeah, my mom did that. Walk, take your bike, you don't need to waste gas. I mean, she was always just, she was recycling before recycling was possible. I mean, just all those things. And but like I said, for me, it was hard as a little girl to have a mom that was so different. I just wanted her to be like the other moms. But I can say as a grown woman, I'm so proud of her and so proud to be her daughter. And we have a group in Chicago where we call ourselves the Broadband. And our friend Rusty named a name for someone like Ruthie, which is a tough tiny. And I think of that tiny little pin and the power of that pin and the power of Ruth. She was tough tiny.
My name is Azaria. Oh, and I'm her grandchild, and this is Haley, and she's a friend. I met Haley in 2nd grade, and we would always sneak over to my grandparents' house and steal stuff, and steal snacks and Oreos and candy. My grandpa would check his candy and be like, Azaria, where's all the candy? He would hide his candy and I would always find it. And then my grandma would, we would come and have sleepovers and we would make slides with the beds and with anything we could find. And she would come in and scream at us and, and try and clean up our messes. And we would go outside without shoes on. And she would scream, "You're gonna get pneumonia." But I also thought, so then when my grandma passed away, I thought, oh, well, I'm not gonna have any family anymore. I'm not gonna have any place to go or any place where I can hang out or just be by myself sometimes. And so I just thought, but then I was like, oh, I probably shouldn't think like that. I should try and remember. And I know that I'm always going to have my family with me. And I feel like my grandma would want us to think that way too, that we're always going to be together no matter what. And no matter how far we are, we're always going to be together. I don't know.
Hello, everybody. How y'all doing? I just want to say Ruth was a wonderful woman. And, just looking at everybody here is an example of that. And I know that everybody that came in contact with Ruth became wonderful. And like I said, I see it here. Ruth helped me out. She's been part of my life as long as I can remember. And without Ruth, I don't think I'd be here and doing many of the things that I'm doing today, because she created and put a light inside of me that is like, can't be blown out, can't be taken away. And I just want to tell you a story, seeing how everybody's telling a funny story. She told me, she said, Kahili, stop by anytime. My door is always open. I'm thinking like, yeah, right. She said her door is always open. And she said, for example, let me tell you what happened. So some student, many of you might know, she said she came downstairs and a student coming from a party, drunk, was asleep on her couch. I was like, what? She's like, yes, he fell asleep on his couch, on my couch, and I just welcomed him, let him go to sleep, covered him up. And in the morning, I made him breakfast and eggs. Breakfast, eggs and coffee. So it was unbelievable. And that just goes to show that Ruth is a woman, or was a woman, that did what she said, and she always had her door open for everybody that came across. And she just had love in her heart, and which would never be replaced. Yeah, so that's all I have to say. But once again, I love y'all, and good seeing y'all. Take care.
I'm Yolanda's little sister. Damn, I'm trying not to cry. And I remember a lot about Ruth, because when I was younger, she would always come get me. And me and my sister are close, and Ren and Tanya. And I remember them chasing me all around the house when I was a little kid. And I am going to miss Ruth. And yeah, so lots of love.
Hi, I'm Brianna. I'm Ruth's oldest granddaughter. So grandparents are really special. A lot of you in here are probably advocates for children and know that kids do better for every caring adult they have in their lives. And so grandparents are a huge value add. But sometimes grandparents also fill in the gaps where our parents aren't able to. And she may not have been a milk and cookies mom, but she was a milk and cookies grandma. I didn't have a milk and cookies mom either. But there were always cookies in grandma's cookie jar. And we made a lot of cookies together, usually oatmeal cookies. And grandma was just someone who, she was always happy to see you, thrilled. She always wanted you around. I didn't grow up near grandma. I probably was the farthest out in California. But we came to visit every summer and other visits throughout the year as well. And I called her a lot, especially in the last few years after Grandpa died. I knew how devastating that loss was for her. And so I called her a lot. And she always said, hello, Dolly, which I thought was just a name for me. But I actually, sometimes I wondered if that was, she didn't know who it was. And so it was just a way to cover her bases. But she always said, when are you coming to visit? She always asked me, I'm an attorney and did like youth justice policy, and I'm now a public defender. So she would always ask me, have you freed them all yet? Um, and then, at the end of the call, she would say, come soon, stay long, the door's open, and we don't have a gun. My grandma was someone who, so I was a bit of a troublemaker when I was a kid. Some of you are probably shocked by this. I was in and out of juvenile hall. And my mom, at a certain point, stopped visiting me. She stopped coming to court. And the first time I was arrested as an adult, my grandma happened to be in town, and she came to visit me right away. And that's probably no surprise to anyone here that she would do that. But as someone who was really, really struggling, to feel like someone loved me no matter what I was doing, it meant a lot to me then, and it still means a lot to me. And I've seen some dark times. I was also someone who stayed with grandma and grandpa for a period, in a low period. I always felt like my grandma had my back. God, I miss her so much. Calling her and talking to her about work. I work with young people. I feel like I got to benefit from both parts of grandma, the part of her that was a loving, doting grandparent, and also the part of her that was a fierce advocate. And it was a privilege to learn from her, and to talk to her about the things I was working on. We could really talk shop. And I feel like some of the things that I've learned from her, both in my work and in my personal life, is that family is not just your blood family, that you can love every child in the community as if they're part of your family. And that's really how we build a world that is what we want. And that you can choose people to be a part of your family. And you do that through loving them and showing up for them. I love my blood family, and I love the people that I've chosen as well. That you can open your home to people, and it expands your life. It doesn't take away. I feel so privileged, not just to have known my grandma, but to be her grandchild. I feel like she's the person in the family who I connect with the most. I can be a little sharp-tongued, but I also care really deeply about justice. It's a guiding force in my life. And I aspire to be as ferocious as she was. So yeah, I love you very much, Grandma. You are very missed, and we were all so blessed to have known you.
Hey, everyone. I just wanted to say for the record how funny Grandma was. I have a couple of stories. I was one of the folks that was lucky enough to stay there for a while. What? I was lucky enough to be one of the people that stayed there for a while. And while I was there, I went to Tennessee to try to be a whitewater raft guide, and had a bunch of stuff that was sent to the house so I could, live outdoors for however long. And Grandma saw these packages coming to the house, and she was like, "You're such a consumer." And I was like, which is probably the worst thing Grandma could say about a person. But I was like, "Grandma, I'm going to live in the woods." And she was like, "Why?" And it's a really good point. Another time recently, I stayed there for about 2 weeks. And uh, sorry, I just spent most of my time cooking for her, which was really awesome. And we were sitting down to a movie, and I was just trying to get her out of the MSNBC loop. It's I showed her. She was like, "What do you like?" And I'm really into this movie, Dune. And I'm sorry if you heard this story before, but she's like, "Yeah, I'll take a look at it." And so we're about a half an hour in. The entire time, she's just like. And finally, there's a scene where there's like hundreds of people all sprawled out over the desert, and she just says, and forgive the vulgarity, but it's grandma's words, and how often you get to swear in a church. So she said, "Look at all these stupid fucking people making this dumb fucking movie." He's like, "You want me to turn it off?" She's like, "Please." And I think the moral of that is just that she didn't understand how we could spend so much money and time on any projects that weren't directly helping people that were in pain and suffering, and you really can't justify it. But she was so funny, and I'll miss her.
I'm a Dune fan, so I'm glad I got to go after that. My name's Youssef. When I ran for county commissioner the first time back in 2010, Ruth and Andy were big supporters of mine. And for those of you that don't know the story, I won that election by 1 vote, 2 votes after the recount. So both of them were absolutely instrumental. They had a fundraiser for me at their house, which was awesome. But I just want to quickly say, today is an interesting day because there's been already 2 rallies this morning that I went to. And there's a third one that I'm going to after this. And when I saw 3 rallies in one day, I was like, oh my God, can I do this? But then when I saw that this was also today, I was like, I'm going to make it happen for Ruth. And I think like when we go out, we are entering a very difficult time. We are in a very difficult time as a country. And as we express ourselves, as we go to rallies and demonstrations, as we do what we can to resist against what's happening, I know that for myself, I'm going to be doing it every day, thinking about Ruth and Andy, because they did really inspire me to be a public servant for as long as I have. This is my 15th year in public office, and they would always contact me. They would always get in touch and ask me to fight and ask me to push and ask me to keep going. And so I always think about them, and I think about those first days when they supported me. I think about what they told me and how passionate Ruth and Andy both were to build a better planet, to build a better world, as everybody has said. And so, to the whole family, thank you for giving us Ruth and Andy, to our community, to our world, to our planet, to build. And as we go out into the world, each of us now, everybody in this room, there's an overflow room in the basement, which they tried to send me to. And everybody in all these rooms, we are all living to carry on that spirit, to carry on that love, to carry on that passion. And I couldn't see it, but whoever was telling the story about Ruth at the end of every meeting would end by her saying, "This is bullshit," and storming off. I feel like there will always be a Ruth Zwiefler in me being like, "This is bullshit." So every time, there's an opportunity to speak truth to power, every time there's an opportunity to push back against injustice, to speak for those that don't have a voice, Ruth will always be in our hearts and in our minds saying, "This is bullshit," and pushing us to carry on. So thank you. Oh, and I should say our County Board of Commissioners did a resolution to honor Ruth. And so I want to speak on behalf of the entire board to say Washtenaw County, my colleagues, Washtenaw County government honor and value Ruth's contribution to our community.
Okay. Sorry, I'm back up here again. I got a little too scared to speak last time, but I'm Azaria's friend. I'm of over 7 years now, and that whole time, Ruth was a really big part of that. When I was in elementary school with Azaria, going to middle school. I went to 1706 after school almost every day, all the time. And it was always, she always, me and Azaria would go biking in t-shirts and shorts in 40-degree weather. And Ruth always was like trying to make us put on jackets and really caring about us. And she cared so deeply and so much. And it was really good. I never really knew the social justice side of her as much as most people in here did. But it's great to get to know more about her. And I always just every time I hear people talk about her, I'm always learning more about her. And did so much in her life. And I feel like I'm always getting more knowledge about her. And I can imagine I still will, even after this, even after all this. Yes. Okay. Thank you.
Hi, my name's Liz. I actually grew up around the corner from the Zwieflers and met Liz, their oldest daughter, when we were 4 years old. Just happened to run into each other. And we've always, known each other and been together since that time, as children pretty much. And I just wanted to say, I really have been formed by being luckily in the presence of Ruth. Feeling very fortunate and so lucky that I grew up from a very young age, learning from Ruth. And I'm just very grateful. I think I'm a better person because of her. And I passed it on to my children. I feel because of Ruth. And just to add some levity, and I told Liz this because when I came to see, Ruth, and I shared with Liz, one of the things I caught myself doing was mimicking Ruth. I learned this from Ruth. People speed down Vinewood, and I'd go, slow down. And she did that. I mean, I witnessed her do that on South University, trying to enter some slow down. So, I mean, yeah, that's the tough. That's an example of the tough little of that.
Thank you very much. I'm an Ann Arbor kid. I was born and raised in Ann Arbor. I know a lot of the folks in the room here, and I went to Angel Elementary School, which I haven't heard mentioned today, which is just the backyard of 1706. And I have two very brief stories about Ruth. Mrs. Zwiefler to me. I've never called her Ruth. It was always Mrs. Zwiefler, and it always will be Mrs. Zwiefler. But there are two people in this room in front of me, Donnie and Mark, Ruth's son, and we were arrested. We were arrested playing basketball at Angel Elementary School. We were playing basketball and we looked outside the window and we saw the cop cars and we said, they're probably here for us. We took off and we all ended up jumping over the fence over to the Zwiefler's house. And a shotgun was leveled on me by this one Ann Arbor police officer. And he says, you're a keeper. And then we ended up getting taken down to the jail. And this is where Mrs. Zwiefler and my mom come in. And she saw something good in us, thank God, because she worked out a system with the system to get us not put into the system, but we ended up teaching kids basketball at Angel Elementary School as our punishment. And for all of us, Donnie went on to work for Northwest Airlines, Mark for the government, and me in law enforcement. That criminal record would have been a record for all of us. We would never have been able to become who we are. So we see this situation where we talk about Mrs. Zwiefler doing so many things, and it was just the small little impact she had on us that day and what she did for us made us flourish in our careers for the rest of our lives. We've talked about a lot what Mrs. Zwiefler has done for the living. I'd like to briefly talk about what she's done for the dead. And many of you know my brother, Rusty. And Rusty was an Ann Arbor talent, just a great guy and my hero. And Rusty died young. He died young, and John Zwiefler was Rusty's best friend. And Rusty was buried over off of Forest Hills, off of Getty's and Forest Hills. And Mrs. Zwiefler told me at Rusty's memorial, which we had at Angel School, we had one in New York City and then we had one here. And she said, Rusty will never be alone. I'll take care of him. And she was, for years, when I'd go and visit Rusty a few times, if I was visiting Ann Arbor, I'd go visit the gravesite. There was always flowers there. And then the grave was always upkept. And that was all because of Mrs. Zwiefler. So on behalf of the McGee family, on behalf of Rusty up in heaven, who's probably serenading Dr. Zwiefler and Mrs. Zwiefler right now, kicking out the keyboards, thank you very much. And thank you to the Zwiefler family. Your mother was a remarkable, remarkable woman. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Jane Newcomb. And while I don't have a lifetime or decades and decades of memories of Ruth Zwiefler, I did have the unique opportunity of living with her the last 17 months of her life on this place we call Earth. It wasn't easy in the beginning, forever independent, but over time we really got to know each other. And I just want to say that I appreciate the time I spent with her and the fact that in the end she called me her friend, something I'll always be grateful for. Thank you.
So I don't really have any really good thing to say other than that I was her neighbor for 45 years. And the reason that we bought that house was that Andy and Ruth invited my late husband, number one, to go. He was a physician and Andy was a physician. And they had a welcoming party for him. And they said, neighbors next door who were builders, they're selling the house. And that's how we got in. And so the incidental interactions were all the time. You know, we were part of what Ruth initiated was neighborhood dinner parties. She would invite the whole neighborhood. She would make lasagna and stuff. We, I was listening to the thing that you all already mentioned that she kept saying in her 90s or 95, when she was 95, I need a job. I need a job. I want to do something, And she really was capable of doing it. It's a shame that the school, that Angel School, didn't give her a chance to talk to children or do something because she really wanted to do it. And she was so vital until the very last time. We had a dinner with her 2 weeks before her former person who was cleaning her house, Christina. She said, she's dead. And we couldn't believe it because she was so vital. She was so vital that I envied her. I developed knee osteoarthritis. I couldn't walk as fast. When we would go for a little walk every now and then, she would outrace me. She was unbelievable. And she was in her garden all the time. And she was digging, actually, and, doing things and planting things and so on. So we had a lot of memorable interactions. And it was a real shock that she's gone, as well as Andy. I have some pictures of them together on the porch where he was declining. So I join all of you in really mourning her disappearance from this life, from being part of our life, because in many little ways, she was part of our life. So.
This is for you, Mom, because I'm not comfortable speaking, but also thanks to Mom. This is my mother's dress that I, of course, had nothing to wear. And this is her dress from Japan. But I think Mom was a dichotomy of very traditional and decades ahead of her time, always. She was a very traditional mom, I think, in that she read to us, and everything that everybody's saying, she read to us every night, and she made us Easter dresses that matched, and she made lammy cakes with paper mache to brighten up the porch. And she always thought I was a far better person than I am. And she taught me to look at the world, not just through my eyes, but through other people's eyes. And that's a gift that I'll always carry with me.
I'm Ed Morin, and I've known Ruth and Andy for 25 years. We met here at Ann Arbor, where we both attend. Anyone who knows the Zwiefler's house knows that there's a small commode right in the center of the first floor. And as people do, the Zwieflers have put up a couple of mementos. One of them is a little plaque that Ruth put up, and it says, "Young at heart, other parts slightly older." And indeed, that does characterize Ruth. No matter how old she got, she was still young at heart. And then there's another thing that's even more prominent, and that is that the degree, I'm at a loss for a word. The diploma, the diploma of Andy's, and it appears to be silk. It's framed, and it's in very elegant Latin. A medical degree from the University of Pennsylvania. Where else could I read elegant Latin? But right there. Now, the thing that brought Ruth and me together the most was our work with the Palestine-Israel Action Group. We, over a period of a dozen years, distributed to various organizations 750,000 postcard size, we call them map cards, showing the loss of Palestinian land since 1948. Ruth had a very strong impact on that movement that you see visible almost every day in this society right now. So I'm really grateful for having known the two of them and having been able to work so closely with Ruth. Thank you.
But I don't really know what to say about her. She, like we said, she was complicated and conundrum. Beautiful, not too beautiful, loving, and tough. And Lizzie was saying something the other day. I thought, okay, I can't think of anything about her, but she said, "Mom, it was always right." Like if you ask questions of our parents, if my mom didn't know, my dad, and it wasn't wrong. It was always, you know, the truth, you know, like what flower is this? What bird is that? What leaf is that? You know, who's that person on the TV? They really did know everything. And because it was kind of hard to follow in those footsteps. And so he's like, well, you should like know that and try to follow the footsteps of your parents. It's like, there's no way. But I would do that. I'm way not around what they are. But I'm not the fighter that my mom was, but she taught me a lot and I've been a different role without her. But yeah, thank you all for being.
God, so that you will show.
Receptions will be at 17:06.
Hey, Brown, thank
Hey, people, is it off? It's off.